So why do your ballots force you to identify your party affiliation on the outside of the ballot just like this in Washington state? Now let's discuss this, and I'll explain why this happens once every 4 years. Now, okay, I've been actually getting just tons of questions about this one, just like I did 4 years ago. And I'm not the only one who has explained this situation. And in fact, I've linked to some of those stories down below, but I hope I can explain it adequately for you, my viewers, so you at least know why this is happening. Now, first I need to explain that historically, there was never any indication on the outside of any ballot, any mail-in ballot anyway, which political party you were in or you might be affiliated with in Washington state. This is actually a relatively recent and frankly unnecessary change made by our legislature back in 2019 before the 2020 election cycle, but it only happens every 4 years during the presidential cycle. It happens once. And it only happens for the partisan primary election in March every 4 years. So your party affiliation is not, and I repeat this, it's not on the outside of your ballot during the general election, the primary election in August, or any other special elections. It's only on this once every 4 years during the primary presidential cycle. Now in Washington state, I'm going to point out that we really probably have the lowest official party affiliation in the population generally in almost any other state in America. And this has a long history going all the way back to the early 1930s. In fact, back in 1935, Washington state came up with this blanket primary system that would allow voters to generally kind of vote in whichever party primary they wanted to every election cycle. And it was this way until 2003. So for almost 70 years, this kind of kept clear and open party affiliation in the general population very low. It was very hard to know which party people were in, and they oftentimes switched. Now, I produced a video here just a few years ago, and I've linked to that down below, about how Washington state's top two jungle primary system works. And this collapse of that blanket primary system kind of led to that. So I've linked to it down below if you want to understand how that happened, kind of where it came from, how it works. And although it's a different issue than the topic we're covering right now today, it did have an impact on this issue. Voter party affiliation is irrelevant in a top two jungle primary process, just like it was mostly irrelevant during the previous blanket primary system that our state used for almost 70 years. However, both primary political parties, the Democrats and Republicans, they didn't like this. And they essentially wanted to make it easier to identify kind of some percentage of voters who were clearly affiliated with their respective parties. So it was easiest to do this by creating a presidential primary system where voters had to choose openly which political party's presidential primary they wanted to vote in. Now, clearly, each voter can only vote in one or the other, Democrat or Republican. You can't vote in both. If you do, I believe that your ballot's essentially disqualified if you do that because they don't know which one you're actually intending to vote in. However, in 2019, supposedly for ease of sorting, the Secretary of State, with the push from the Washington State Legislature, mostly a Democrat push, by the way, that decided that identifying which party primary that you're going to be voting in should be clearly identified on the outside of the ballot for ease of sorting. Now, in truth, it doesn't really help them sort it out as much as they might pretend or claim, because the way the counting machines work, they can easily just feed all the ballots into the same machine in the typical batches they do right now, and it would count those who vote in whichever primary they choose, and nobody would really know which one you specifically pick. But the problem with that, of course, is that the political parties wouldn't be able to harvest the data after the election cycle to see who is currently affiliated with which party. The political parties want this because they want to know who to target with their ads, their mailers, their get out the vote efforts. And keep in mind, by the way, in most American states, you actually register by party already. I mean, that's done in most of America. In most states, people know your party affiliation already very clearly in advance. So this is really nothing radical or new. We just have a long history in Washington and a strong aversion in our state from openly admitting which party we're in. And most Washingtonians like having the flexibility to vote for different party candidates if we choose to do so. So at the same time, they kind of could still achieve this goal by locating the party affiliation under a privacy flap, as ballots historically have had in the past. But that easy fix was rejected by the politicos and bureaucrats as well, and I'm There's really no good reason for it. So listen, it's easier to blow this out of proportion, as hundreds and thousands of people do, because I get this question again all the time, and I have for the past 4 years or so, where people ask if everyone knows which party I vote in because I've marked the box on the outside. Well, once every 4 years, and only in this one primary vote, they certainly do, and they can determine if you voted in that primary. Now, one layer of confusion exists here because it's actually not uncommon for one party or the other to encourage a lot of their voters to vote in the other party's primary when their own is locked up solidly, and it will cause grief if they can help a primary vote get skewed. We saw this back even in 2008 when Rush Limbaugh pushed his Operation Chaos, and he had Republicans vote in the Democrat primary for Clinton to give Obama a hard time. And then we've seen it even more recently this year, right now, where Democrats are crossing over to vote in Republican primaries to show an artificial inflation of Republican votes against Donald Trump. I mean, these are just the games that politics inevitably produce out there. However, there are probably thousands of other issues that I'd be far more concerned about than this one ballot that comes out every 4 years where the party affiliation is clearly displayed on the outside of the envelope. Is it annoying? Yes. And many people, mostly Republicans, view it as an intrusion on their privacy. This is particularly true with the wokester kind of mob, the cancel culture, and the insane ESG and DEI cult that's in the workplace today we hear about all the time. Is it absolutely necessary that this is done? Not at all. I mean, there are clear policy fixes that could make this far more private, like the privacy flap that I mentioned earlier. Do all your ballots show party affiliation on the outside? Nope, they don't. Only this one March ballot every 4 years, and only for the presidential primary itself. The rest of the time, there's just no party affiliation on the outside of anybody's ballot. Could sophisticated people figure out which presidential political primary or which presidential political party primary that you voted in? Yes, they can. But who really cares? I mean, they can't really tell exactly how you voted unless every single person in your precinct voted the same way. They can't tell why you voted in that primary. Was it a one-time thing, or is that just who you are? There's no way for them to know that. And anyway, this is something that can be fixed. But right now, we have a majority party that won't fix simple things like this any more than they're going to fix the big problems that challenge us today. So I don't see it changing much, as some Republicans have tried over the years now to change it in recent times. Will it eventually be changed? Probably. But that day is in the future. And for now, while I don't expect there to be a big impact in Washington state with this partisan primary vote, because here's just a little prediction that isn't really that hard to make. Joe Biden is going to win the Democrat Party primary. Donald Trump is clearly going to win the Republican primary vote. So you can choose to either be part of that voting process or you can refuse to be part of it. But that is where we are today. That's probably what's going to happen, and this is how it works. Now, this is why this one time every 4 years, you have an open party affiliation on the outside of your envelope. Now, I've linked again, as I mentioned, to just a variety of other articles and commentary on this issue down below. If you're focused on this issue more than anything else, I'd encourage you to read what I've linked to down below in the video description area and maybe shift your focus a little bit. But regardless, if you want to impact anything, you need to show up. Voting is actually just a very small part of that process. And while this isn't the most critical vote that you're going to probably have right now, it is still a quick and simple way to stay engaged. Remember, there are many other things that you and I should be doing to make an impact just beyond voting. And I discuss these issues all the time on this channel. The future does belong to those who show up. So make sure that you go ahead and show up out there.